welcome. This is Ron Chomp from ACS Group, and we're talking multi-bin warehouse management today. This is the distribution and manufacturing class general training for what I like to refer to as phase 1 and phase 2 of an implementation that covers a good part of our core product here today. There's a lot of content, so excuse me for trying to get out as much as we can. Recordings will definitely be available if you request it. And to cover what we're going to talk about today, we have here the guideline of the content. I tend to review the materials as what's important on phase 1 or phase 2 in implementations. A lot of times customers are, can only use X amount of the software features, get going, and so not to overburden an implementation, we can definitely create some phases here in an implementation. As outlined here, phase 1 of an implementation will definitely be the setup of the bin locations in the system, get the multi-bin inventory in there, and getting going with whatever's required on the sales order side. In phase 2, what could be referred to as what's required in phase 2 would be more use in the in picking in the system by utilizing some of the inventory restrictions that we provide, and then utilizing the directed put away features that we have. So there's another class that we also I will provide in 1 to 2 weeks. It's sometimes referred to as the advanced class. So mainly the content of that class is about the add-ons. We talk about the expiration date vendor lot traceability add-ons. That's where you can track the expire dates and the vendor lot numbers. The order fill rate wave batch picking, that's to automatically select orders, so you don't have to select orders that are required for shipment in the day. And then a license plate, which refers to the creation and the builds and receipts and shipments of pallets and case packs, pallets throughout the system. There's also, I should add, the in-transit warehouse software, which handles the transfer of inventory between different warehouses, to where you can use sales order and purchase order to help to help transfer inventory between different warehouses. Okay, to get started, I don't have to tell you why the goals here. Often, our software is mainly used for multi-bin in order to understand where our software or where your inventory is. But a couple of goals that we also take care of for warehouse management is help get out the right inventory to the right customers as you can set up in the system, and definitely improve on pick efficiency. So what I like to do is cover where the software is, just so that we're comfortable on where we poke around in the system. Just a couple reminders then on the setup of the registration and how to prepare the data, and then we'll go ahead and set up a brand new company and get going from there, and that will warm us up on some of the features that we want to work on. And namely, I'll get into the manufacturing bill of materials and work order on how to auto-generate material issues if desired. A lot of times that is. And then we want to definitely walk away today with knowing the different location types that we have and what purpose they serve in the system. And I think it's easy to, most everyone knows what an allocation is, but so you feel comfortable in allocations. And we'll talk about directed picking fully and directed put away also. So that's a lot of times the ability to put goods away tends to be a lesser priority in many implementations. So that's a good reason to put that off in a phase 2. There is a little bit more setup involved in order to do a good job for the system to help advise where to put goods away. Okay, so to get us going here, what is the software lay of land? And then let's talk about the registration in the system. First, we are mainly throughout the system as you use the software. So if I were to be in inventory maintenance, I can look up quantity on hand information just as well as looking up other inventory in the system. If I were in sales order and doing a distribution it's all fully integrated, and when I list out the available inventory to distribute and associate to a given line in an order, it's all right there. I don't have to go anywhere outside the system in order to get at some of my inventory. That said, we have our unique menu options in inventory. So off the main menu, we have a couple here in inquiry, a couple inquiry screens, location inquiry, license plate pallet ID inquiry, and the new dashboard, which handles now our put away of inventory. Then under inventory and reports, the reports that are sensitive to multi-bin inventory start from here on down. These reports here on up are the regular Sage 100 reports, and those ones are not changed. We keep the integrity of that as is by the manufacturer. Under the inventory setup menu, we do have a few menu options. The multi-bin options is our company-wide options, and this is, generally speaking, our starting point, and then you can override the options that you have here within product line maintenance and maybe a little bit in warehouse code maintenance. Also, I should add, you can override ultimately by item on certain things, like for directed picking and directed put away. So the hierarchy is, this is the top level, multi-bin options turns it on for the company, as well as have the company-wide options. In a product, for certain product lines, I can change options for given product lines here in product line maintenance, but then in item maintenance, I can override it. I override options to specific item numbers there. In multi-bin location maintenance, obviously this is where we do create our bin locations and maintain them for different options and look up quantity on hand information too. The region maintenance is a good place to create region codes, which are synonymous a lot of times with zones in your warehouse. Region codes also can be used to group bin locations together. For example, production line 1, production line 2. Pallet ID maintenance and ID type code maintenance, which is synonymous with packages or package types, those are unique to license plate, and we talk about that in the advanced class in the next week or two. So that said, that's it. That's where we are. That's the unique places where we are. Then I could say that after you install the software, then let's go from that point where we are. So first thing what I do is go into role maintenance, and because we add the new menu options, you want to be able to have access to it. And so perhaps if you're admin login, grant yourself full rights into the system. If I were to drill down in a couple places where we are, under maintenance, there are a few, pallet ID, multi-bin options, location replenishment dashboard, inquiry, and so on, setup options. So, but a majority of the unique menu options that we have are here in the inventory. Then for security events, all of our security events that we provide in the system are under inventory, and they're from here on down. You can tell they come up pretty quick here with multi-bin in the front of the name. Then the next thing we do is do the registration. We typically provide a text file for the registration key in the system. So after you do the installation, you will and do the role, you'll come in here, copy we give you instructions to put the text file in the ACS group folder under the MAS90 tree, and then you hit the activate button, and for you, it will activate the software just for the software that you're licensed. We always ship all of our software, or most all of our software, and so we'll activate all the components that you have. In this case, you can see I have several. The next step after doing that is to hit this Prepare Data button. What this is asking you is, do you want to prepare data for one company or all companies? We suggest that you hit all companies, and that way it will, the data, the new files will be created for all companies. So if you don't, if you don't prepare the data for all companies, then that will affect applications like Visual Integrator, which sometimes says, oh, not all the files have been created for a certain company, so it might hinder certain processes in Sage 100. So it's best to just do it for all companies. We don't erase data. It's perfectly safe. In fact, when you do upgrades with our software, typically this is the first thing we have you do after installing our software. So you hit the All button, it will go through all your companies. A lot of times on a brand new install and that, it just takes about 1 minute for it to go through all your companies. Okay, after that, I'm going to select my test company here because that's the one that we're going to turn on. And so what we recommend is that you prepare the software in a test company, much like myself here, before you implement on a live system. You go through the setup in the test company, if you're implementing RF handhelds, get the setup in there, get your training on the RF handhelds, and do as much you need to do for training and preparation and changes to your procedures prior to going live, and make sure that you're well prepared. Typically going live means when you do a physical count or the final physical count in your live company. It's very easy to transition certain setup files in the old company or the test company into the live company, like the options and those sort of things. So definitely check in with us if you have questions on that. We can save a lot of time on copying certain things over. So what I'll do here is I'll click, this is under inventory. Sometimes it's hard to see everything with these trees. So I'm under inventory, setup, and I'm going in company-wide options. And this is a brand new company. What I did is I copied an ABC company, a Virgin ABC company out of my stock data and copied it to a TST company and brought it in here. So this is the setup and the options in here are as is, as a typical brand new installation. So all I do is click Enable Multi-Bin for this company. If you have some of the add-ons, of course, you can enable those also. If you just have licensing for the base software, then you will enable it just the first one. I hit Accept. What it's doing is just going back through for the company, ensuring that the data is intact. Now it's asking me to activate each one of the warehouses. So right away, what we do is we turn off each warehouse from the use of multi-bin in those warehouses. So what you could do is click Continue here and go about selecting your warehouses. I will select the first warehouse code. It's asking me, hey, this is disabled. Do you really want to select this? And I do. Then we have a new option that says Initialize Inventory for all warehouses, and I will turn that on. And what that means is this means that all my warehouses I want activated for multi-bin warehouse management. I don't want to go through each warehouse one at a time, which I most surely can do. This option here, Use Item Warehouse Primary Bin Locations, this is referring to using the stock bin location field. We will create those bin locations for you for each warehouse and put the inventory for the item into that bin location for you. So if you have a good setup for those locations, we can create that for you. And some users don't. Some users have used that as a way of keeping track of where their inventory has been. So they might go bin location, comma, bin location, comma, and just and using it as much. It's a 10-character field. You can only get so much. But and you might say, well, I don't want to create that mess in my bin locations, and that's good. But remember, we're just setting up a test system, so it's maybe a majority of your bin locations can get in there, and that's satisfactory. In role maintenance earlier, I did need to have rights to at least create a bin location on the fly. I could create a bin location if I went into setup and then bin location maintenance, but if with the security right turned on for me to already as I start with the new system, I can do this. I can create a new my first bin location in a warehouse. It's asking, is this a brand new bin location? It is. I'm going to accept the defaults. And then when I hit proceed, it's going to go ahead and create the inventory for each one of the warehouses. And I did create those primary bin locations right away. And that's it. That's how you get started with the system. Really, in all intents and purposes, you can start using the software at this point. But what's realistic is re-importing bin locations. We'll talk about that. Doing a physical, full physical, and some preparation of some documents that you might use, like the picking sheets. And we'll talk about all of these things here in a little bit. So to judge what I've done, I can go in inventory maintenance for my first item here, and you can see that I have my first, this is the typical stock data for E310, and it's referred to as a primary bin location. Remember, I had that checkbox on, and that put that in here as a primary bin location. We'll talk about those things. But I have all my inventory here for that one item in that location. If I scoot along into an example of a lotted item, all the lots here, what we do is we go through the cost detail information, we get all the lot numbers and put the inventory in that primary bin location in this case, and create the inventory for that. And that would apply to serialized goods too, and I believe I have a little bit here, and these are all the serial numbers here, and it's put in that primary bin location to get started. Then the next step to kick off the new system, as you can see now I can view my inventory. Besides doing the physical and getting a good list of bin locations in, would be the creation of a pick sheet. So I'll go in here and picking sheet printing. We have different templates here. If I was going to create a template code, the across and rows. The across one is used when you're printing available inventory in the system, and the rows one is used when you're printing allocations or when you reserve inventory to sales orders. The rows ones is best because it will print a wave pick sheet for you right out of the system, and that's most practical. Just for our example here, and to move along quickly, I'm going to select the across one, and that's to print my available inventory. I'll select a few sales orders just so that you can see some of the inventory come up on that pick sheet. And that one's a kit item where I have no inventory on that at all. The 8971, there's a little bit. There's, let's see, a little bit more here with the 6655 and the VOG. And we'll talk about formatting the crystal reports and such here in a little bit. But these are all sub-reports. And so I'm off and running, and I'm ready to use multi-bin. I can start doing transfers and selling inventory, and I can print my available inventory on the pick sheets. Okay, so to get moving along here on a couple points that we want to address here, then let's talk about the use of primary bin locations, location types, and region codes in the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my real ABC data where I have some good examples of what I'm talking about here. And as you can see here, I have my HON H252 inventory spread out through different bin locations. We have different location types and these region codes right here. This is designated in bin location maintenance. Over here, region codes and location types. So in my test company where I've created all these bin locations, initial bin locations, all of them come across as a pick location, as a location type. And then, since they were already set up in the inventory data as a with bin locations, we went ahead and called them primary bin locations. We didn't have to do that. But a lot of times businesses that do have that location tend to focus in on that bin location. Sage 100 users will often do that. So we have these other location types. So we have the pick location, overflow, staging, floor, and other. So what I'd like to do is, so that we get a good understanding of location types, is talk about the definition here and show a graphic here of of my warehouse. So pick locations, when you're using directed picking and directed put away especially, pick locations tend to be those locations where you can get at your inventory, it's within reach, as opposed to be on the top of a shelf or not be in the bulk area. Let's pretend that you don't care and you want to just get moving with your inventory, and that's fine. I would just keep all my inventory little location types as pick as the system default. The overflow locations, here too, again, we've used when wanting to use some of our features for directed pick and overflow, or directed pick and put away. Overflow tends to be those goods that are maybe are out of reach or maybe back stock. You'll see in a little bit there are options to automatically get goods out of the overflow for large packages, maybe large case packs or pallets of goods. That way you can keep your primary pick locations or your regular pick area with the smaller unit of measure type packages. Staging locations are those locations where you are staging inventory in order to move later, and that would be a great example is receiving, shipping, the work in process, staging for shipping, return of goods, and so on. The system for directed picking, directed put away automatically doesn't want to pull goods out of those locations because it thinks that you're staging inventory for a later purpose. So that's why we would call a location staging. Don't have to do it that way, but that by default it behaves that way, and we'll talk about that option. Floor locations, we can use those to position inventory prior to shipment. You'll see that you'll be able to set a priority ahead of any other setting in the system in order to get inventory out of those floor locations ahead of other inventory if you want to. For example, you high volume inventory, drop a pallet of goods in the floor locations, then print pick sheets, grab the inventory out of the floor if you desire. And the other is just an alternative to pick for a different kind of priority for a regular pick location. Maybe it's a different section of your warehouse or another warehouse entirely. Maybe you have two warehouses to pull inventory, and you don't have, rather than having two warehouse codes in Sage 100, you can have maybe one warehouse code, and maybe you want the other to be the last priority. You don't really want the picker to go out there unless you're absolutely out of inventory. That's one way of using other. I could have done the same thing with overflow, by the way, too. So as promised, let me get that graphic up. And so this is the typical use of some of these location types. Receiving dock up here in the top, staging location, return of goods, and actually I say it right here, return of goods, staging location, overflow, for my back stock of inventory. In my warehouse down here at the bottom, I have all my pick locations. Let's see if I can scroll down a little bit. And here I have my racks to pick, and I like my picker to go through the warehouse in a nice fashion to where they're not doubling back down the aisles. And then, but then that's all my pickable unit of measures, and then in my pallets, large case packs, I have back up here in my overflow section over here. Then over here for floor, and then light assembly of kitting, a couple examples of using the floor location types. Shipping, staging location. So we're just talking about a few location types. There's a legend up here actually too. The staging locations, and pick just your average ordinary pick location where you want to pick from. Over 95% of your locations are just going to be referred to as pick, generally speaking. A manufacturer, the good example, once again, my racked inventory, so I have some down here for materials, raw materials to pick from. And down here in the corner, I have some production lines, which can be just regular bin locations. Maybe I've got different aisle types, and maybe I got inventory in these areas for production, and I can utilize a region code to help group some of these locations together. I failed to mention that previously. I'll come back to that on the prior page. Region codes to group some of my areas. So work in process, staging location for sub-assemblies, production of goods. Sometimes with sub-assemblies and you're producing over and over, defaulting a sub-assembly WIP location, for example, it save a lot of time. A defective staging location. The other thing I wanted to point out on the region codes, all these sections in my sample data, I have a region code associated to it, so I can prioritize where I'm going through sections of my warehouse. I didn't have to have all my racks within this region code called APIC, but I could have had sections of it, and I could have, and because you could prioritize the way you want to go through the warehouse. Okay, so that's an overview of location types. We're going to get into here in the next discussion here, discussion on how to move inventory utilizing transfers, and then we're going to start off with purchase order receipt of goods and some of the options that we have in order to do that. Before I get started on that, are there any questions?
I've got no hands raised and no questions in the question box.
Thank you very much. Okay, so to get going on purchase order, and actually let me get you back. Let's do one thing before I do that. I'm going to, I neglected to pull up the manual, and let me pull that up here. I usually do. And so here's the manual. And the point here on the bringing up the manual is there are some good discussion points here in the initial sections of the manual. And and these are the decision points on some of the options that you might use in both receiving and shipping. And so right now I'm on page 16. And these are some of the questions. So use of RF handheld. The reason we ask that is, well, a lot of times when you have RF handheld, you want to receive goods into the receiving dock and then transfer them out. If you don't have RF handheld, then what a lot of businesses will do will receive the goods in, put the goods away, keep track of what they've done, and then do the receipt of goods and then record the bin location that way in receipt of goods data entry. So receipt of goods could have put all my goods in the receiving dock automatically. Also, but and if I did put goods in the receiving dock, it's always a two-step process. Going into receiving, then do a transfer to the actual location they went to. When you have RF handhelds, you're doing the receiving, it goes into the receiving bin location, and then you do a transfer. And the two-step process when you don't have RF handhelds sometimes not desirable, sometimes it's just fine. A lot of times businesses with lot serial goods doing just fine with that. The question of lot serial or not is because you'll see that there's an automatic option in to receive complete as you do the receiving, and using our software you can choose to not receive complete, and then that will make it a little bit easier perhaps in order to entering the lot numbers, and then the leading question here is the primary and staging location, and we'll get into these discussions here right now. So let me reduce some of this. So going into multi-bin options here, and we're going to start off over here on the 5th tab, and then the PO receiving options. Right now I have this set to auto-assign warehouse staging location. That means that it's going to look at the staging locations that I have set up in the warehouse. So let me pull that up. In warehouse code maintenance is where we have our staging locations. We can turn off the ability to use a warehouse in this warehouse with this checkbox. And then for my distribution company, I have these staging locations set up. So for warehouse receiving, I have the receiving bin location. Going back to my option screen over here, I have the auto-assigned warehouse staging location. And then I have the option here to whether or not to receive complete or to enter the quantity received. So entering quantity received would be businesses that tend to get a lot of partials on the receiving. And then you're usually entering the quantity received. The lines option is preferable in the situation where you don't receive complete often. That way it will land into the quantity received field, and you can input the quantity received. The header option here, as it says here, it tends to be best when you're receiving complete, and that way when you're going from the header to the lines panel, it's going to automatically put the inventory to the bin locations just like that. It's all about saving time, a little bit of time here. And then the both option, of course, does both. And I'll leave this as both right now. And then coming over here on my example purchase order, I usually have a purchase order, and I'll close out of my warehouse there. And let's see what I have over here. So I do have an example here where it's a sample of FIFO items, standard costed, lot serial goods right here. And that's purchase order 10034. So in the receipt of goods of this purchase order, remember I had the both options set, and it's set to put my goods into the receiving staging location. And I selected the purchase order. Now as I go to the lines, notice it didn't give me the stock prompt, do you want to receive complete? Because I set it to go ahead and receive complete where it can, and then go from there. So here, this is my FIFO item. It received 100, and then it put in the receiving bin location. Could have been the primary bin location for the item. If I have primary bin locations, I want my inventory to go there 9 times out of 10, that might be useful. And then I can come in here and change it if desired. My radio receiving dock for 50. This is for my lotted item in here, and I'm going to go ahead and receive the 50, and this will be for lot like that. And note that it put in the receiving bin location for me to save that amount of time. Another note on this distribution screen is I can use this list box to list out existing lot and locations. And I can list out my existing inventory by clicking this button here. For lot of goods, that's not really practical as a non-lot good. So let me come out of here, come back in, and I will put my lot in like that. These are UDF fields, and we'll talk about that in a little bit on how to use our features for UDFs in the system. And then this is for my serialized item, and I can use the serialized feature. And I'll do something like serial number, how about serial 01, and I'll put that in the receiving dock like that. And that way it will go into the receiving bin location, and then there's my quantity 10 going into that bin location here in receipt of goods. That's it. The production of the receipt of goods register, we always put in a subreport in there, and this is a Crystal subreport, and a Crystal subreport in the purchase order receipt of goods register, and you can change the content of that, of course, if you want to eliminate some of the fields or change the audit trail information in here. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. I'm going to pull this inventory in here. I'm going to adjust out, let's see, I'm going to adjust out these items right here. I'm just going to receive in the AM/FM radio. I'll produce the receipt of goods register. And in this case, I'm just receiving the radio into the receiving dock. And then let's go look at our inventory now sitting in the receiving dock. There it is. Oh, let's see. Right there, and 80 pieces, and so the system's kept an audit trail of all the locations. Had I received in the inventory into 3 different bin locations, Sage 100 will keep track of the one audit trail. In our file for history, which is the IM404 bin location history file, we track all the history for all the locations selected in a given transaction. So while the inventory is in here, now I can do a transfer of my inventory. And so this is the discussion of how the different transfers that we do have in the system. There are 4. I had to think about that. There's 4. Okay, so first of all, looking at my inventory in the receiving dock, I do want to put my goods away in certain locations. I can choose to click on it, and then this single button over here is the transfer button. And this is just looking at that inventory item, and I can put in the quantity and how much I want to transfer. Transfer 165 and select the location for that inventory and hit proceed. And now it went ahead and did that transfer of inventory. The other button right over here is called the group transfer. This pulls up all the inventory in the task that you're in. So I'm in bin location maintenance, so it's pulling up all my inventory for this given bin location. This is, I can select, I can hit the green button, the red button to select all, deselect all, and select the destination bin location and so on to move my inventory this way. So this is the second way to do transfers. A little known feature on this group transfer is selecting inventory from the left-hand side. Note here, for example, I have the 2481. This is a lot valued item. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different lot numbers for the 2481. Now, one of them is on hold. Now, pardon me, 2 of them are on hold, and so those will be automatically excluded from the transfer. But I can select from the left-hand side. Oops, I didn't select from the left-hand side. I can select the 2481 from the left-hand side, and then it will just bring up my inventory in here. And sort of lied on the held inventory. It brought it up because I have rights, and I forgot about that. I do have rights to put goods on hold and release them, and since I have those rights, it is allowing me to do a transfer of that inventory. So once again, by clicking in inventory on the left-hand side, the group transfer, it's sensitive to that and will automatically list those and select them for you. And so if I'm moving all this inventory, even though it's 5 different lots, I can hit a transfer. Why do I do this? So that we can improve the speed of moving goods around. Once again, these 2 transfer programs are sensitive to where I'm at. So if I were to go into inventory maintenance over here, this one's in the wrong company. And I'll pull up my inventory over here. So you can see that here's the 200 pieces that are held on hold in receiving. Let's look for the other receiving here. There's some more held for this particular item. And then here's some what's sitting in receiving for this lot valued item over here. So once again, these are the transfer buttons. I can transfer inventory, selecting the quantity and the destination bin location. There's a quick transfer. There's immediate audit trail. When you're using handhelds from ScanForce and ScanCo, they use the same application to move inventory between locations. And so that way we get the real inventory, real-time inventory in the system, and as well as the audit trail of the activity that went on here. And I tried to bring up an audit trail screen. There wasn't anything on this allotted item here yet. So then, just like the other screen, it's sensitive to the options that you have on the left-hand side over here on the inventory screen for the transfer. The third way to do transfers is transaction entry. In transaction entry, I can select to do a transfer, not only different warehouses, but my same warehouse. So I can go from 000, 000, I can select my inventory, and it brings up our transfer screen. One hint, selecting inventory with the lot lookup at this point will default both the lot and the location in one click. I can delete that, and I can also use the show all feature, and that will show all my inventory. I can do that not only for lotted inventory, but I could do that for my non-lot inventory also. So here's an example, selecting inventory with the list, and then the location list that way. When I have the location list up like this, you have to do one row at a time. I can't work one column at a time. So in other words, I can't put number, 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 and then go location, location, location. I work left to right. It's a 5, destination, bin location. Whoops, I selected the same location, and so on. 5, destination, location, so on. The options over here on the right, we'll talk about here in 1 minute. Okay. That same applies with serial. Oops, that wasn't serial. This is serial. The let's see, I'll do just 5. I can select the selection grid like this and do my click, 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 and click, and then a destination bin location like that. And actually, I have too much set in here, so I will skip that. So this is the third way of doing transfers in the system. In this case, in this example, I was selecting the same warehouse. I could select, obviously, 2 different warehouses, no problem. And then the system's very sensitive to the options you have set up in product line maintenance and warehouse code maintenance on which warehouses, which product lines are enabled. So if you're doing a transfer for an item that's where it's turned off from multi-bin, it knows that and it will handle it accordingly. So in my case, I believe warehouse 99 is disabled over. Oh, I've got to select, trying to do this right from the same line. Something like this. And then I'll select 99 over here. Notice that when I'm doing the transfer in this case, the left-hand side, which is enabled for multi-bin, is requiring the lot and location as it should. And then on the right-hand side, it's not requiring me for a bin location. The fourth way to do transfer is location replenishment dashboard. In here, I can select my goods to transfer that I desire to transfer. I can keep those transfers for later and do other transfers, and hit the transfer button, and it will move my inventory. And we'll talk about the movement of goods here and replenishment and rotation of inventory. I'll come back to that screen. Okay. The real nice feature with the RF handhelds, integrated. It moves the inventory for you while you're in the warehouse. It has the consistent audit trail that I talked about. And so let me pull up an inventory item here. Before I get moving past transfers, are there any questions? We're going to be talking the sales order next, and then bill of materials and work order.
No questions as of now.
Very good. So let's go back to our test company. Let's talk about the way that we had that test company set up. As promised, it's ready to go when we turn the system on. So what I want to show you are the options that are pre-set up, and then and how that's good for printing inventory, and then how we can transform that into directed picking, and why we might do directed picking or not. Okay, mouthful there. Okay, so first of all, picking sheet options are over here. All these picking sheet options have to do with picking sheets. Sales order, bill of materials, and work order pick sheets. The top section, and for the most part, a lot of it is sensitive just to sales order, but the options do apply to bill of materials and work order. So in the upper left-hand corner, this is all about sales order except for this last one here, which says enable printing of allocations for bill of materials work order. This says, do I want to print allocations on my pick sheet? And by default, it's set to no. And in fact, it says disallow picking sheet auto allocations. If this was unchecked, when these other ones are left unchecked, then the user in sales order picking sheet printing would have a choice to go to automatically allocate inventory or not. And a lot of times businesses don't behave that way. Either they're doing allocations or they're not. So by having this override here, it is the picking sheet printing will be made so that it is not allocated. The format of this screen works like this. This quadrant over here is all about what are my options about printing available inventory, typically left to right, prioritizing my inventory left to right and presenting it to help the picker know what inventory I really want to pick. So if you have primary bin locations, typically you might want that first. And so that's why it's asking in what print order. A lot of businesses that don't have, that have lot serialized goods do want to have their inventory by the lot numbers first. No, pardon me, I was wrong field. I can select override sort option for lot serial right here. Pardon me, to come back over here, the other options were bin locations, which would just be printing in just bin location order, and that's the default. The sort code is the sort code that's in the setup of a bin location, and we'll talk about that. The primary bin locations, that's set up along with the item, and where I can designate the primary bin locations that are the locations that are just set up for that item. And this is using the last received date in the inventory. Let's talk about that for 1 second. What is the last received date? Actually, I'm in bin location maintenance over here. Let me get over to inventory maintenance. The last received date, and since I have options open, the last received date is where the system is keeping track of the inventory, the last date it was received. And I don't have much history in this test company, but when I'm moving inventory from one location to another, we have this option, and now I'm going to get back into options. And what this option over here says, and this is on the main panel, is the receive date is set from receiving and staging. So what that means is when I'm moving inventory from one location to another, it's going to pull in the original receipt date into the new bin location. Now today, this is just happens to be today. What if I did something like this? I can click this info button. I can change this date to January 1, 2014. Now when I transfer this inventory from one location to another, it brought forth the old receipt date. Why does it do that? Because with this option on in options, it's carrying forward the original receipt date, knowing that you want to keep the integrity of that inventory even though you're consolidating or moving your inventory around. The reason we phrase this like this, except when it's moving from receiving, receive date is set from receiving staging location. So what that means is if I brought my goods in from the receiving dock and then I transferred it out, that means it's got to set it by today's date, but not the original date that it was received in. So the reason we do that is you may have received goods in, but now you're moving them onto the floor for picking. And that was here in warehouse code maintenance for the staging location, just as a reminder. Then my test company, once again, doesn't have that. But many customers who don't have lot serial goods do like this option because on our pick sheets, we can print that information, we can print that information on the pick sheet when I'm printing just my available inventory on there. And then over for directed picking and allocations, I can also allocate my inventory automatically that way with having that option. And that way the system can automatically release for shipment goods that way. We also provide that if option over here for issuing inventory out. And so maybe you want to utilize our automatic issue of inventory or material issues as you do a backflush or auto issue in work order, or just do it in production entry. And so it can prioritize that inventory on there. We'll talk about that fully here in a little bit. But we're talking about pick sheets, coming back in here, talking about what's in these quadrants, and then this was the printing the available inventory on the pick sheets. And then if you're using allocations, if you're allocating the inventory either automatically or manually, then you may want to print wave pick sheets because we can prioritize the pick flow of your picker going through the warehouse. And that's going back to this graphic. That's going through the different regions, the different zones in your warehouse, and that's going through this way. And we're going to talk exactly how to do that. Right now, we want to just fully cover the discussion of inventory, printing inventory, and how to ship that. Okay? So then going back to, and that's a decision point. Just like we were talking to receiving, you know, and receive complete or not, this is a decision point for many businesses. Do I print available inventory on my pick sheet, or do I have this system auto-allocate the inventory, and do I tell the picker? First of all, if the inventory is convoluted in the location and it's going to be too hard to get a lot that would be in the back, the older one, then a lot of times that's not good. Or to allocate inventory. Or may not be good to allocate inventory if the inventory is a mess. And so that would be a waste of time to send them in different directions. So then in those circumstances, we highly recommend printing the available inventory on the pick sheets, and then then invoice it as you would ordinarily do that, and then or use the RF handhelds as you ordinarily do that. So let's pull up a sales order. There's just one item on this particular sales order. This is the default one that comes in the stock data. I'm going to make it a little bit more creative here by selecting a couple more quantities on here, and then I'm going to print the pick sheet. And this is the inventory type. And if you recall, when I create the different templates, and then when I did that initially, I selected the across one. The across one is really good for printing available inventory, and that's it. And we'll cover the format of that here in a second. But here, now I'm printing my available inventory, printing it left to right. Those are the priorities that I got set in there, if you recall that. Had I select the primary option, this primary one would have been in the front of the list. If I allocate anything in this order, remember we can pre-allocate any lots or non-lot items in sales order entry. We would want to do that maybe because we want to reserve this inventory for the sales order. Maybe we're waiting on other goods to come in and we want to reserve that. That's one reason to reserve it manually as opposed to automatically or putting in automatic procedures. So here I can select the lot by using the lot lookup, and that way I get both the lot and the location. Had I typed in the lot, it will prompt you for the bin location that way too. So now that I allocated it, we do tell you here on the screen what is allocated, and now I'm going to reprint that same pick sheet, which is all about printing the available inventory. And what we do with those allocations is we bring it to the front. So here it's telling you what it's doing. Now it is a primary bin location that I selected, C100, and actually that's all I had for my inventory right yet. So so it is telling you this is in Crystal a formula, so you can override that. If you still want to keep the status field, you can override the formula if you desire. So in the formula, we're saying, yeah, it is pre-allocated. This is pre-allocated inventory, and this is an indication of the picker to pick that inventory because it's allocated for this sales order. I reserved it specifically for this sales order, and same down here. When I printed that pick sheet, there was an option, these options right here down below, and this one's print the allocations, but not my available inventory also. So in this presentation, it's just printing what's hard allocated to that. But in this example, we're talking more about printing available inventory on the pick sheet, but I did manually reserve some inventory for this customer because because I was waiting on some other goods. Okay, so this is a clear button, clear allocations button. I can press this to clear all the inventory I reserved on the sales order. So ask me, do I want to redisplay it? And I do, and so that's gone. Everything I just did there for that item is in the detail history. The system not only keeps track of inventory movements, it keeps track of sales order pre-allocation movements too. So it's controlled here on the screen, include sales order allocation activity. So this first entry says, I pre-allocated 100 on this sales order. This next entry says I cleared it out, and it's telling me the sales order number. We do that so there's an audit trail of the movement. Had I kept that allocation and invoiced it, you would have a trail of the allocation to what was actually shipped, and that's sometimes useful. Or you might have a question of why something got allocated or not, and this audit trail could be useful for that. You could choose to eliminate that in the display. I can change the display like that, include it, exclude it, and so on. So in my case, I remove my pre-allocations so that I can give a demonstration on how to invoice this order now. That's order 171. And then what I will do is go in shipping data entry, same as invoice data entry. So in this case, it's given, since there is no pre-allocations to the sales order, we have an option in order to auto-allocate, and I'll talk about that in 1 second. Just want to show you the flow here on doing a distribution. So here's my item, indicate the quantity shipped, show my available inventory on this grid, pull 100 from that location, and there's 100, I believe, on this lotted item. In this case, I'll do a little like this. Since I'm in shipping data entry, and I have that option set to auto increment, and that's why it auto allocated it and shut the screen away. So I think you understand the rest. That just wanted to show the typical flow as opposed to doing allocations. So let's talk about allocations now. Allocations start from the options. Why do we do it? It's so that you can improve the accuracy of the kind of inventory that you want to be picked, improve the flow of picking through the warehouse, and improve the invoicing process too. So here we have our directed picking options. And so what I want to do, actually before I do that, is let me close all these screens here, and now let me bring this back up. One thing to note is you do have the ability to do automatic allocations in a few different ways. One way is as you enter the order. And so on the main panel here, we have this option, auto allocate as the order is saved. If there's a big lead time between the order coming into the system and getting out the door, that may not be preferable. That was that option right there. But so if I want to do it at the time of picking sheet printing, I could just leave this as yes, and actually it's irrelevant of which option I select here. This is the rest of these options do apply on how I want to pre-allocate in sales order entry. So again, and I should show you this one option. So let's say I do have the auto allocate as I enter a sales order. Pardon me. So I'm going to create a new order, and note that we have this new checkbox down here to auto allocate the order as I save it. So as I enter the order, actually there's select something where I have inventory, and there's no inventory. Change my warehouse, and I hit accept. So now that I did that, it went ahead and allocated the inventory. I'll pull the order back up, and you can see it did allocate the inventory. I could have left the order behind and brought the and left it in the system, and then to print the pick sheet later. But here you can see how it automatically reserved that inventory. The reason we have a checkbox here on the front is it will default on for any new order or any time I change a quote to a standard order. And if there are times that also if I were to add lines to the order, it will change it also. So, and it will turn it back on. But if I'm just pulling up an existing order and looking at it on the screen, it will default off. And because you don't always want to auto allocate. But if you want to have control of whether or not you want to auto allocate as you enter the order or you change the order, you can do that. Obviously, if I enter a line order and if I don't want to auto allocate, I can just turn that off at will. Okay, that's why we have that option. And then if I can refer you back into the manual for one thing. Oops, that's not the manual. Back in the manual, in the appendix, we talk about some of the options in order to do things in Visual Integrator and the business object interface connections. So what I can do with Visual Integrator, it's coming down into here. So in this section here, we talk about auto-allocating to inventory. So let's say I'm importing a lot of sales orders. I do want to reserve my inventory to the sales orders as I import them in, and we give you this field as you import those sales orders, and it will auto-allocate the inventory in the background for you. Web orders coming in, you want to give priority, you want to go ahead and reserve that inventory while you have a chance, you can do that. And you don't have to wait to print the pick sheet or any other action later if you choose to. And so this is a good feature. You can also, there's discussion on programming for programmers in the back, further in the appendix on this too, but this is using Visual Integrator here. We'll come back to other Visual Integrator here in a little bit. To finish our discussion on directed picking, so come back into here into multi-bin options. So we were talking about this option as we save an order. I'm just going to leave this on to pre-allocate and sales order entry. Allow it, yes. And what that means is I just want to be able to change my entries in sales order entry. When that's set to no, no one can change allocations in sales order entry. Some businesses don't want to do pre-allocations at all, and they don't want any of their users to have access to that. Then on picking sheets, so since I do want to do allocations as I print my pick sheets, I'm going to uncheck the disallow option, and I'm going to check this option, default to auto-allocate as I print the pick sheets. This option says, and if you recall earlier, default to print only the allocations on my pick sheet, not my available inventory, and I'll show an example of both here in a little bit. And then this other option, only print sales order lines with allocations. And what that means is if I have a back order on a sales order, it won't print those back orders. It'll only print what I'm telling the picker to go pick and not worry about the other inventory. This option right here, enable to print allocations on bill of materials and work order, I'll show you that here in a minute, but that gives you the ability to do just that. You can do a production entry in bill of materials and print you can select that production entry in picking sheet printing, and also when you print work orders, picking sheets work orders, you can print the allocations just for those two. There's a special prompt for that. Now that I'm printing allocations, I can use the wave picking options, and right now the wave pick sheet is set to no. By the way, what is a wave pick sheet is just a nice pick sheet, typically in bin location order, but I'll show you how you can have control of that and have your own order on that. So what I want to select is this option called standard form. If I selected the option that says yes, that means I want to print a wave pick sheet for a group of orders. So if I'm using picking sheet printing off the menu, then it will give, with this set to yes, it will give me a prompt at the end of printing a group of orders to print a consolidated pick sheet for all the orders that I just printed. Now it's not as, if you're familiar with our wave batch picking, it's not as complex and it's not summarized as we do that with that add-on, but it is a software that's a picking sheet software that's been that is in the system, and it does just that, printing a list of all the inventory that on a pick sheet for all the orders that were selected to print. So on my pick sheet, I can choose to print in bin location order or by the sort code for the wave effect. So what is that? That's here in the bin location, and here again I'm in options, and that's in bin location maintenance, and that's this code over here. I'm going to switch over to the other company code, and I'll show you what that is, how I use that with the sample data. And then the last option is to use the sort code in the region. So that's if I wanted to sort the region code and prioritize sections of my warehouse. So and actually let me show you how that works too. And here, there's a sort code right here in the sort. Actually, let's switch over to the other, to my ABC data at this point. I used the test company to do the setup for the setup to print available inventory. But in my ABC company, I have the good setup to print the allocations and the directed picking. So here are my different zones of my warehouse, or groups of inventory for production line in my case. And these are my sort codes for my region codes. And so let's see, the lowest number would come first, and that would be 5. So that means I would go through my warehouse and go through the parts department first. Through, if I go picking through the production line, it's just strange in itself. And then the number 12 is the next highest quality section, and then the cage, and then through my pick area, and so on. So these are the sort codes that option looks at. So going back to options and how I have this set up over here, I have the sort code set over here. By the way, the options down here in the bottom right-hand side relate to our wave batch picking by the order fill rate and all that, and that's not today's discussion. So I have this set in here, and then let me show you the bin location, how I have those locations set up. In the bin location, I'm using the sort code. This one is 2. This is the lowest one. So all my first aisle I have set up as a 2. So if I were to pull up my diagram on actually how that would work, so my first aisle, I don't need to prioritize. And I even say here the sort code is 2. That means the numbering scheme for bin location is just fine as I go down this aisle. But I need to get creative as I go from location A30 through A50 on the left-hand side, and B10, B25, I need to use the right sort codes to go pick left to right down this aisle. So let's pull up that location over here. So I start off with A30, A30, L, M, they're all 100 on these sort codes. And then A40 is A20, or a sort code 120. So that's a little bit further. That's about midway in my rack system over here. So then if I were to look at the B10, oops, and I typed it in. I shouldn't have done that. B10L, you can see it's 105. So I started from 100 on the far left-hand side. On the right, it's 105. Then on the left, a little bit further, is 110, and so on. And then you can see I'm using 105 just up for bin location, up through bin location B20, B20U, and then I jump to sort code 140. And the reason I do that is that as I go further down the line, my sort codes increase left and the right-hand side, so I get it right, so I can pick left and the right-hand side. What I could do is something like this. I can list the bin locations like this, and we show the pick flow on the right-hand side like that. I can click on this, and then now I can list the pick flow right on my screen, starting off in my first aisle here in the first A aisle, and then going into B, and the J here is something I was messing around with in an example, and pardon the mess. So then we come down to 100, and you can see now I'm picking left to right. A30, then in B10L through B10U, I'm picking on the right. Still picking on the right up through B20. Then I'm going back to the left-hand side to 40. So I think you're getting the idea, and this is how we get the pick flow, the perfect pick flow used in the system. And then as I print the pick sheet for my sales order here, it will represent that pick flow perfectly for me as I go left to right. Actually, some of this inventory is already pre-allocated, but here in walking through the warehouse, I'm picking left to right over here in the aisle here, A30, B20, and so on, and picking left to right. Now I'm telling the picker which way to go. So as an example here of using this real-time, pulling this up, I'll hit the clear allocations. Now show it cleared. As I print the pick sheet, it's going to go ahead and allocate the inventory, and it's going to have it, and it's going to print it right in the right order, as well as different regions in my locations, for my locations. So the one thing I didn't talk about, and I was sort of saving here for last because it does get in depth a little bit, but that's the directed picking options. So in my example, I'm pulling inventory from my primary bin locations first. So once again, keep getting that. So pull up inventory maintenance, and then I'll pull up our directed picking options here. So I'm pulling from the primary bin locations first, and that's set up in the aisle, the item here, and those primary bin locations are designated into the item. You can import to these primary bin locations. You can have an infinite number of primary bin locations, but you can have up to 5 where you're mixing inventory. Most customers just have 1 or 2 max, and that's what primary and secondary pick locations, primary pick locations, because maybe they're next to the shipping dock, or they've just been doing business that way with their warehouse. So then, in my example, I have these primary bin locations. But if I wanted to have other bin locations and just set a maximum in the warehouse, I can do that. There's an option down here, and so let's say in the entire warehouse, I want to keep a minimum of 10 in my warehouse in my primary bin locations. Then what I could do is set them up in the bin location itself. I can go in bin location maintenance here, and I can select my item right to the location here. So this is very practical where I have just one item per one primary bin location per item. One item to a bin location, and for that primary tag. So let's say I had a whole aisle designated just for a certain item, and there's 10 bin locations. Then I can select that item in those 10 bin locations here, and the setup over here. Setup over here in the item over here to say I need a minimum of 10 in the whole entire warehouse, and then our replenishment system will pick up on that and advise properly to replenish in the warehouse. So 2 different ways to set up those primary bin locations. In the bin location, when you just have one-to-one, or if you possibly have a mix of items, or if you want to designate a different maximum for the location, you can do it right here in the item. Okay, so what I'm saying here in the rules is to pull inventory first out of the primary bin locations. For my non-lot serial goods, do it by the last received date. I could have done it by bin location or the least quantity on hand in the location. The the sort code option uses that sort code in the bin location, and that's great for weight when you're relying on the weight of the inventory, and the location proximity makes a difference. Steel companies will prioritize the picking up inventory that way. These none options mean to only allocate out of the primary bin locations and don't look at the rest of my inventory. This option here says look at only in my primary bin locations, but go ahead and exceed quantity available in my inventory up to the maximum I have in my warehouse. For lot serial goods, I can pull by the lot receipt date, lot number, the expire date if you have our add-on for expiration date, and this is LIFO, last in, first out. Then these are for the different location types. So this is just for the pick locations. We talked about the pick locations and primary pick locations. And then these are for the other location types. Here for floor, I said if I have goods on the floor, pull from there first. And by this checkbox on, I am pulling from there. I can have my other area, if that was another warehouse that I wanted the system to look at to get inventory or something, other is a good way of doing that. And then overflow, I can turn off and on, or what have you. Now, using this option over here, jump to overflow, this looks back at the item, and it says, what is the minimum quantity to justify getting goods out of my back stock, is what it says. And then in the setup here, note that I could use, that's what this jump to overflow means. and then I can override, I can use a unit measure code instead. If in sales order, let's say you select a pallet and then you want to pull that from the overflow, you can do that, for example. And then these options that we have all here can be overridden in product line maintenance and item maintenance. So if I was going to override that in here in item maintenance, for example, and just have unique options here in the item, we have the button right here for pick. I choose this option right here, override directed picking settings for this item, and then I can do what I choose. Maybe I don't want to pull these out of the primary bin locations. Maybe I want to get it out of here, here, or here, and these are all the choices that I can do. Another option that we do is for license plate, and I'll just mention it, is that's what these options over here, and they can optimize the best package to ship, and that's why that's on the screen over here. So you have the same option in product line maintenance. So let's say a certain product line, I want to override settings. I can use the checkbox, override settings for that product line. Or I can override settings now for this item, which is the ultimate override, superseding the product line. I know it's a mouthful. The whole idea here is you, by doing the company-wide options in here, and look to do overrides where you really have to. But these are the rules that we do for directed picking, and they are the rules that we use for rotating inventory from other stock locations and to bring forward into other locations. So before we get into some of that, let's pause for a second and then see if there's any questions here about the directed picking, the wave picking, the options that we use here to select the wave picking and all that. Any questions, please?
Looks like we've got everything taken care of.
Okay, I do like to say there's a test after this, so those who do good on the test get $100 or $1,000. Make it worth your time. I know. I'm kidding. Let's talk about manufacturing and using these allocations for manufacturing. So in my XYZ company, I can go into the manufacturing tab, and it's broken up in two parts for the finished goods and raw materials over here. So here it's giving me the choice to put in, as I do my completion or my production entry, to put in a primary bin location, right, or the staging location. So the reminder staging locations here in the warehouse, these are the ones I have set up for manufacturing. So for my finished good, for bill of materials, I have quality control bin location. And so for bill of materials, for raw materials, I've got a staging location. Maybe I like to position some of my goods there as opposed to pulling right from the bin location, so I can stage inventory in the raw materials WIP location. Same thing for work order and that. So what I can do as I do my production entry is I can default those bin locations. What I'd like to mention here, and in the manual, if I can find the manual, we have these overrides which you can implement throughout the system. Some of these here, like the sell by date, the expire date, and all this, you know, that gives you the ability to override the expire dates, and that's the discussion for expiration dates and so on. But if we look down here, for bill of materials, I can select the bin location that I can put in the bill of materials header. And that will, so all I got to do is create a UDF in the header and call it this name bin location and fill it. And as I do a production entry, it will put my finished goods for that bill will go into that bin location. So it's like the ultimate override for a given bill. Same thing for the work order. I can put this in the work order, and then don't worry about it being a UDF field as opposed to one of our real bin location fields, is because when you do the production entry or the completion, we will create the bin location if it didn't exist before. There's an override here for raw materials. Note that for where to select goods for a particular bill. We pull that into production entry on the header screen so that will default it. Why would you want to do that? Because maybe you're doing a production line bill and you want to just select a single bin location for that production line
where inventory came out of. Maybe that's a great example of why you might do that. Just to cover this screen on some other overrides that are notable, we have a special integration with Starship, and this is multi-bin enabled, and you can put that on a line, sales order line. Note that when I was doing directed picking automatic allocations, you can say no allocate line, and that UDF you can add to the grid in sales order entry, and it's a nice way, and you can check on that line, and it will so the system won't allocate. That was suggested by a customer. One other thing here for a sales order, I could put a default bin location, and I could do the same for a customer. And so you can have a single bin location for certain inventory if you want for a customer. You can actually restrict inventory, and I didn't talk about restrictions yet for locations, but you can restrict inventory for certain customers. By putting in the default bin location here by customer and by sales order, the inventory will automatically go to that sales order as you allocate your inventory. So these are overrides. This is later in the appendix 112 here in the example, and we talk about these overrides that you can implement in the system here. So back to our production entry and work order, we're talking about the staging locations and then how you can override it. And then if I were to go in production entry over here, I can go ahead and do a production entry. By the way, I didn't talk about the options, and pardon me for doing that. Maybe I'll do that here. I'll delete this one. Delete a couple of them because I have a lot of inventory allocated here. So let's do, I'll select this first one here, and we can build 10. Note that it's defaulting my primary bin location. I think I have this one set in the UDF field in the bill. We have the expiration date control, so that's why we have these fields over here, and that is just for that. Remember, we can set the raw material bin location. I could have defaulted that in the bill, and so it could have set that in here. A selection in this field means when I'm going to the lines paddle, just pull it out of that certain bin location. Leave it blank if you're just going to auto-allocate it based on the options that you have in the system. So I'll go to lines, and now it went ahead, pulled up the lines, it looked at my options of what I have to auto-allocate, and it did that. So for my battery, I pulled goods out of my WIP raw, because I think I have the option here. In fact, I should pull that up. So what options do I have in place over here? So I'm on the manufacturing tab here, and I'm saying auto-assign inventory for my staging locations, and that's why here back in my production entry why it did that, and it pulled it from the WIP raw. And then, but I don't think I have that for dough and flour. So here, pulled inventory, 20 pieces, and it's doing that based on the lot receipt date. So I'm getting my oldest inventory out. I say you could have done lot number or the FIFO, the expiration date. This option here this is for non-lot serial goods. This says go to the next bin location when I have no inventory, or just pull it out of the bin location but go negative on hand. So several manufacturers do this, and that way they always pull inventory out of that single bin location. If it's a staging location for WIP or their primary bin location, and they'll pull inventory in their production no matter what, even to go negative, and that way they can replenish later, and they promise to replenish those locations later, because this way you can keep producing in the system and not stop to wait for goods from receipt of goods or to be transferred, rotated in, or what have you. So that's the benefit of that option. This only pulls from that primary staging, and this is using that FIFO, first in, first out, on the last receipt date in the bin location. We talked about that earlier. So these are the options. So then note that it automatically automatically allocated my inventory for me. I have a lot of inventory here for flour, and it pulled it and automatically allocated. In my case, I think it did in first expired, first out here on that one. So earlier we talked about the options for printing pick sheets for bill of materials and work order. So if you recall, that was on the picking sheet options on options. And so here I can select that production entry, just like that. And now when I hit print, it's going to, since I selected the production entry, it's going to go ahead and print that allocated inventory. So this is a different way of looking at things, and this is allocating ahead of the actual production rather than after the fact. Now you're telling your picker what to go pick. Obviously, I can go back in the bill or production entry and override what was actually picked if that is what was planned. But this is another way of looking at things. Had I not selected a production entry number and selected a bill, it will print the available quantity on hand in the pick sheet, which many are after, and here it is. And this is the same way we talked in sales order. It's a sub-report. You can access it, double-click on there, and on the sub-report and override it. The way it works in work order is when you have what we say here in our options. Pardon me, I didn't have that open. And so what we say for work order is if you have the options turned on to automatically allocate this, then it will go ahead and when you do a backflush or auto issue, when it creates the material issue, it will do the allocation of inventory for you. If I select this option of the prompt one or no prompt, then it would not auto allocate the inventory. And many do, especially if you have primary bin locations. You might as well, and it will save you a lot of time. Or, of course, the staging location theory, too. Okay, I could show that real quick. I think I could do that in a fairly quick order here. I normally have something sitting out here, and so I could show you how that might look. So I'll select my work order, which I do a backflush on, and I'll do a completion, select my work order, select just a little limited number here. It's defaulting the shipping bin location from the work order. Note here it says 3 lines completely allocated. So this is my completion still. There's my material issue. And these are the lines that it pulled through from the work order and auto-allocated that inventory for me, pulling out the lot serial numbers in this case. On the work order, if the picking sheet printing, if I wanted to print those allocations, I can choose to do that. By selecting the work order number, it looks to see what's in there pending and what's reserved, and it will print those if you wanted to do that. Okay, so that's our discussion on bill of materials in work order, and we want to talk about pick restrictions and a little bit on put away, on directed put away. So are there any questions before we get into that information? Any questions?
Looks like we're good.
We're good. I'm going to switch over to my ABC company. Thank you. This is back into bin location maintenance. And we really didn't talk about the creation of a bin location, but a lot of time users import it, and you will import using the settings that we have in here for Visual Integrator. And I'm just going to take 1 minute to talk about that. So in Visual Integrator, I can select this file to import my bin locations. All you need is the warehouse code and bin locations and in your file, and it will default everything in here as a pick location. We talked about that. Sometimes if you want to create a lot of another certain location type, you can override that, and of course you can override other fields. It's very handy to do Visual Integrator for bin locations for the capacity settings that I'm about to talk about, in the region codes perhaps. So for physical count, if I was going to do a freeze in my physical count and then import my physical, I can do that. You're going to use our file. Don't use the one regular in Sage 100. It's the IM404_physical. The only thing that's different than regular Sage 100, we really need a bin location, and that's required. And we discussed that here. Bin location is required if enabled for multi-bin. You can have warehouses are turned off for multi-bin, and we recommend highly that you don't put in a bin location for those cases where you don't have warehouses turned on for multi-bin. but do a freeze beforehand. And when you update the variance register, that's a great time to be live. The primary bin locations we talked about, this is the file. Even though you shouldn't be importing to the quantity on hand file, but you might want to export from that file to get at that quantity on hand information. You can do transfers using transaction entry, and you can select that header file here. And so using that for transfers, that's fine. Definitely have to do that between warehouses. If you're doing it between bin locations, you can select this file instead, and it will do the transfers interactively as the imports are done, so that you don't have to run the register and update. It will transfer it immediately. In the back of the manual too, there's discussion on using the business object interface in order to do the same thing too. Sales order invoices and purchase order receipt of goods. Could have had bill of materials in here. We talked earlier about auto-allocating sales orders and using this field. You don't have to be importing sales orders, the whole sales orders. You could just be importing just the sales order number and then say auto-allocate, and it will do it. It never really saves that field. It just uses that as a way to trigger that allocation, that automatic allocation, and then but it will always leave it null or no. This is for license building pallets. So there you go, and that's in the appendix in the manual too. So to come back here on the bin locations and talking about this, I usually recommend when customers start off, just create your bin locations with the warehouse code and bin location, and that's it, and then let those reside in there. But then you get into the setup as you get more advanced with the system, maybe before you're going live or in the second phase. And there you can designate the region codes. We talked about the region codes. You can select the region codes. You can have any number of them created in the system. And if you saw, I was able to refine how I do picking. And you'll see here in a minute how to do put away too. Using that sort code, I can do the same thing. We use this aisle information for put away and these region codes for put away. And I'll show that quickly here. But I want to talk about pick restrictions here. Pick restrictions allow you to reserve inventory. You saw how some of this inventory can be reserved to a customer over here on the screen. So this says disabled. This is for 02 Capri. So if I were to pull up a sales order in that inventory here, let's pull up a better sale. Okay, here, I need another line on this. I think this was for ABF. Yeah, ABF. So that's for ABF customer, far from the 02 Capri there. But note, when I go into lookup over here, you see how it's showing me the inventory? It's doing that because in security events, I have the option to go ahead and show me, let me see the restricted inventory. If I didn't have that option on, that would be hidden from me, and it wouldn't be available in this list to select. But it's clearly telling me this is inventory reserved for Capri. Since I have in the security option, security events, to go ahead and allow me to select restricted inventory, it's allowing me to select it, but it's giving me a prompt. Do you really want to do this? Okay, and that's an example of how we're using these pick restrictions. This is quality control. It's restricted from sales order. This is inventory on hold. This is inventory reserved for Avnet. And that's all done here in the bin location in these pick restrictions. Quality control, as you saw earlier, is great to disallow selection in sales order for quality control. You don't want anyone to be able to sell inventory that's in for quality review or return of goods. Is a great example in another one. So this is the selection for the customer number. I had that over on this first one over here. This is for a customer type field, so I can group customers with the 4-character field in customer maintenance and designate that customer type field. Say if I had different customer numbers for Walmart, and they're different distribution points, and I wanted to restrict those locations for just the Walmart locations. The sale issue, this is to release inventory after a certain date, and that will do it automatically. It will lock it down until that date. And over here on this, and then talking about then moving into directed put away. These are the settings that you can put into the system for knowing the capacity of a location. So I can put in the number of units, that's how many of the standard unit of measure that can fit into a location, or using the cubic size of the package. It could be any volume. The volume size can be whatever you want, really. It could be any number representation. That just the cubic size could be a good example on how to use it. This is looking at the standard unit of measure cubic size, or the volume field. But this is, with license plate, you get the opportunity to select packages, different package types like pallets, case packs, master packs, and you can have unique volume sizes for those different packages and how many will fit in a location. So what we recommend to do the most accurate job is set the number of units field for primary bin locations. So it says, well, 1,000, 100, this will fit 100 eaches in this location, and that's a good way of handling primary bin locations. But for mixed locations, the volume field tends to be a good factor. Okay, so talking about, so that's how the system knows how full a location can be. And then some preferences that you can do in the system are as follows. Disallow put away in this location is a good way to turn off a location. Why would I want to do that? I can do something like this, and this is a little advanced, but let me tell you, let's say if I have a section of my racks, and sometimes I use those racks for larger case packs, and so rather than standard unit measure. So they typically might be like 4 different bin locations, but instead of going A10, A, B, C, I can go A10 and exclude the A, B, C, let's say. And then so the A10, well, I'm using the A10 ABC, I can disallow the use of that. So now I'm using it for standard unit measure, but when I'm using it for the large case packs, I want to enable that one and then disable the smaller ones. It's a way of giving you control of bin locations on why that temporarily on different ways you want to do things. Disallow mix of goods in this location. This means you want one item to land in the location and that's it. What it will do is remembers what's in there last. I say it that way because as it advises to put goods away, it keeps it. You have what's the inventory that's really there, and then it keeps track of what it advised previously, so it knows not to be dumb, to be forward about it. This option here, remove empty when period end processing, that's a temporary bin location, tends to be good for sales orders or jobs so it's just during period end processing. With this option on, it says if it has had activity and inventory went into it and then out and now it's 0, it will remove that temporary location for you. This option to put goods on hold automatically will do something like this. And as it comes in, it's on hold. And then you can release it later. I could do something like this to release it like that, or you might require your quality control person to enter some UDF fields to do that. In our manual, we talk about UDF fields and a good way to do it, and we prescribe that for you because then we do a few extra automatic things for you, like showing them in the inventory quantity on hand screen. We automatically show the user-defined field information. So here and I'll just release that. So then going back to my bin location options over here, pardon me. Got messed up there. Back over here, bin location up. And this is an advanced option to replenish a license plate. So that's a little different. So then 2 more things to talk about on putting goods away. First of all, knowing how much at what time to put goods away in the system. And speaking of terms of primary bin locations, we use that minimum number here. So by locations, I'm saying do a minimum replenishment point of 40. When this gets below 40, then I need to replenish. Or if you remember, for a whole warehouse, I could put a number down here. So then when I use the dashboard, I can create a new batch. I can select the primary bin location replenishment, and I can do this for multiple warehouses. And I'm going to, so the required pieces of information are the warehouses and then the destination warehouse. All I got to do is hit calculate, and it will go through my settings for the minimum replenishment point, and it will provide advisement to replenish those bin locations. I can override it here as desired here, and I could choose to delete some of this. Maybe I want to delete these two. Override the quantities, override the bin locations. The log gives you a little extra information on knowing what kind of information that went behind the computation, especially when it couldn't fill all the locations at capacity, saying that this location's full, so it couldn't do that primary bin location, and so on. And this is what all that information here in the log is given you for. There's two pick sheets that we give you, a pick sheet and a put away sheet. The pick sheet's looking at the settings that you have in picking sheet options, in multi-bin options, and it knows to do it in bin location order, and then to override it for the options that you said. Is it bin location order, the sort code, and all that business, and sections of your warehouse. So this is going to help on picking the goods in order to rotate it into your primary bin locations, which are now here on the right-hand side of this pick sheet. And this is a dedicated put-away sheet. Had you done this in 2 runs, pick the inventory, then you need a put-away sheet. And this is a nice organized way of putting your goods away now. Then what we do is we provide a transfer sheet. You can go ahead and put the goods away, check it off, and come back in here and then override it for exceptions. We give you 2 transfers. One is the quick transfer to move all the inventory right away. The other one's transaction entry. If you're going between different warehouses, you have to do this run. And so just like that, now I transferred my inventory. If I were to pull that entry back up, you can see it's done over here on the right-hand side. If I were pulled up some of this inventory that I just moved like that, I can review the new status here. So in this case, I filled up my primary bin locations, A20M over here. Now this is filled at capacity. Remember, I had set that to a maximum of 100, and now it transferred. How much did it transfer into that location? A20M. Well, actually, there was 2. Let's see. No. Oh no. First line. There's 90 available. It moved 90. There must have been 10 in there previously, and so if I were to click in the detail, there's the movement of 90. So it pulled 90 out of the A30U and 90 into that primary bin location. Note the special information here on how it did that transfer. So we're helping you save time doing the transfer. This is really useful for all kinds of movements of goods. The last option here is to create a standard. So you can create your own transfers from here too. So if I were to click this button, it will ask to create another transfer sheet, and it will be a standard one so that I can manipulate it and reuse it. Do I want to put the quantities on there? In this case, I'll go ahead and do that. So now when I created a standard, it's out here as a save standard. It's not going to validate quantity on hand or anything as I do entries. So, but what I want to do is use this as an example here to do a few things, and I'll delete some of these lines. I'll delete some of these locations. I can select new locations over here. As I enter my quantities here, it is going to validate my capacity, but I'm given the override to not check my capacity here. So it's going to allow me to have quantities that I want to set in here to transfer, but since I'm not really transferring, it's just sort of a standard transfer, it's going to look at this as my basis as what I want to do in the future. So I set that to a wild number. I'll set this other one to another number, and so on. And I'll select all these in the E's and F locations and set these all to nice wild numbers out here. And I hope it would be interesting if I have some of this inventory. So now that I have this standard transfer set in here and it's saved to reuse as many times as you want, notice there's no calculate and there's no actual transfer, but I can print sheets on these if I really wanted to. So now I'll save that. It's in the system. And now if I want to create my own transfer, I can select my transfer. I say where do I want to do? I want to do it from save transfer. Do I want to bring over the quantities? I do, and it did. And here's my own transfers that I created from a standard transfer. And maybe I'm doing this because I'm rotating inventory. So now when I do the calculate, it's going to calculate the best it can from the inventory that I have. And note now it's adjusted down my inventory from what I have available. A30U had no inventory because I had just transferred all that a little while ago in that primary bin location replenishment, so it makes sense why no inventory is in there. And then here it's doing as much as it can into the location. It probably set the capacity in there. If I look in the log, I can see what went into the decision factor into doing this. So here's that first item here, and why it brought it down to 0, because it said that if less than there was lack of quantity available on the first item. The quantity available in the next transfer was 279. So there was 279 left in the location that can possibly transfer. But down right after that, you see it evaluated the capacity location, and the capacity location can only accept 200. So even though it brought it down to 279, it then later brought it down to 200 because the location can only get 200. And so it did the rest going all the way down, and that's how it planned everything out. And now I can go about my business. I can print a wave pick sheet to go pick my goods, a put away sheet, and I can transfer the inventory just like that. And this is how I rotate my own inventory. I retain a standard transfer on rotating inventory for certain spots in my warehouse. Maybe it's for quick pick locations like the floor or what have you. Good utility to make a little difference there on transfers. The other thing that we do here is the put away. You could do it from staging locations, and that's what some of these are. And so like in my ABC company, I just have them there. But for bill of materials and work order, you recall we had staging locations we can set. And I can calculate that. Whoops, I don't have a. And now I could do a calculation, and I have a lot of inventory, but a lot of my locations can't handle it. But no, doing the best I can on advising all my inventory that I have sitting and receiving. But notice now it is advising where to put my goods, and it's probably a good idea to do a put away sheet for this, and then I can go ahead and put my goods away and transfer it and so on. So it's a nice way of using the system. We can do all that because we were able to put the settings in place. If I could just mention a couple things to note on that. Now, in the manual too, in the beginning sections of the manual is a great place, great resource for all these things that we're talking about: directed picking, directed put away, and the capacity. Even note, looking on this page here, on page 21, we're talking about capacity. Coming back up a little bit sooner, here's our checklist, which I started us off on here when we were talking about receiving. This is a whole discussion on directed put away, on how the system prioritizes the different bin locations that are in the system, the location types, the options and where they influence, and how they influence. And then you can click in to write some of the option screens and discussion on the different option screens that we have down in here. That was on the put away. And this is on picking over here. With the interest of time, we're almost out of time here, but I just wanted to show you that the directed put away, we talked about where the capacity is in the location. We talked about a couple options there. A couple options here in company-wide options is some things to think about, like disallow put to a location where the same item exists. And that's great when you're putting goods away and you don't want to put them in the same location where you have older inventory. And this way you can still, it doesn't matter, you know with the volume field in the location, the capacity can still be computed. It doesn't matter we put other items in the same in a single bin location. Our system handles that great. But to help keep that last receipt date intact for items that are not lot serial, you might want to keep that in a different bin location, not in the same location it already is where you have older inventory. Help keep that separate, and that's what this checkbox does. Obviously, there's an exception for primary bin location. That's obvious. And this put in primary if no inventory, if there's no stock. And what that means is if you do have primary bin locations, with this option on, it will advise not to put inventory in the primary bin location until you have no stock at all to rotate back in. So it assumes that with this option on that you prefer to rotate inventory into your primary bin locations before new inventory coming in. Shipping and advice to back orders, that will put inventory into your shipping dock if you have that set up in the staging location. So these are settings there. And then the last thing I can talk about here are the options that you could put in the item and the product line. We talked about pick earlier. You can say override put away for this item. And I can say these are the overrides for this item. If I have preferences, both in product line maintenance and item maintenance, I do have preferences for certain zones, regions, and aisles that I want my inventory to be in. And so we'll look at the company options and those other options. They help advise where to put goods. The best rule of thumb, I know there's a lot of options here that's possible, but you know it's really not that bad once you get into it. And the first and foremost thing to do is work out the capacity. It might be the hardest thing to do. Use Visual Integrator to import that information in, and that will go a long way. The system will refine itself, and it will start putting goods away. And then as you use the put away, pardon me, moving a little fast there. As you use the dashboard, if you say, how did it know what to do, or why did it do something, you can look at the advice that it gives you, both in the log and this put description here. And it's telling you what setting that you used in order to know to put it in that location. Put it in this aisle location because of my override with either the product line or the item to put it into this particular aisle, or put it into this first aisle area, and so on. So the numbers on the left-hand side represent at what point did it determine to put it into that location. If the sort order on the screen might be different than the logic it looked at when it was bringing in the inventory, just informational, and that's why we put the little number in there to help know what logic did it do before the next one. So all that makes sense. I know that's a lot of information, but that's my time limit right there. We did talk a lot today, and I hope it works out really well. We do really appreciate you coming. I will ask you if you do have any questions, I promise. Please let us know if we can be any assistance. Refer to your reseller too. Once again, thank you for coming. Any questions?
No questions in the questions box and no hands raised.
Okay, that means everyone gets $100. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today, and then let us know when we can help. Have a great day too. Bye now.